Hi folks, Mark Devine here with Mark's Weekly Brief. And last week I did a guided visualization and the framework for guided visualization, a short guided visualization around your ideal self. And I thought I'd follow that up this week with a brief lesson on mindfulness and a brief mindfulness practice. Of course, it's hard to keep these all to 3 or 4 minutes, but so if I go over, don't blame me. It's hard to put all this into condensed format. Okay, so what is mindfulness? Tons of people talk about this these days. Mindfulness is when we create a kind of a metacognitive presence in our mind where we become the watcher or the observer of our thoughts and our emotions. This is tricky if you haven't developed that metacognitive awareness already. So initially when people start meditating, they're pretty merged with their thoughts, and their thoughts are running all over the place, and so they feel like a failure. But if you keep practicing, especially if you start by trying to concentrate on one thing for a while before you release the concentration grip and begin the metacognition or the mindfulness, then you'll find that you'll develop the skill. It's like your brain has the capacity to split itself into 2 hard drives because it already is. It's got a left hemisphere hard drive and a right hemisphere hard drive. And the metacognitive watching of your thoughts is the right hemisphere watching from the perspective of context. The left hemisphere is content or thinking. So that's what mindfulness is. Now, the benefit of mindfulness is, aside from stress management and clarity, is to recognize patterns, in particular destructive patterns that are running our subconscious programming and causing us to react in certain ways that aren't helpful and maybe even hold us back. So mindfulness can be very useful. It's an incredibly valuable tool. And I like to think that we would use this in conjunction with other tools. This is why within Be Mind we have a toolkit, which includes movement, exercise, breath work, concentration, mindfulness, insight, journaling, and contemplation, amongst others. So right now you can take your seat and just straighten your spine, slightly tuck your chin, feel like you're lifting toward the ceiling, take a few deep breaths. We tend to use the breath as kind of an anchoring point for our concentration practice, so begin to just watch the breathing at the tip of your nose as the breath comes in. You feel the breath coming up through the nostrils and then down into the lungs. You feel the rib cage and the diaphragm all moving in action as the lungs fill up, and then everything exhaling, coming back out, and you feel the breath again passing the tip of the nose on the exhale. Notice the discrete point where the breath turns from an inhale to an exhale, then an exhale to an inhale, and come back and inhale again. Now we'll do this just breath awareness for a few breaths. Clearing our mind, clearing the cobwebs, slowing our brain waves, calming our nervous system. Good. Now what I'd like to do is kind of seat my attention or my awareness over in the right side of my brain. So I'm going to actually kind of shift my energy over there, and I'm going to imagine that there's an aspect of me that is watching. You can maybe create a set of eyes or perch yourself on a stool, and that's your higher self, your witnessing self. And you're going to look over toward the left side of the brain, and you're just going to say, what is Lefty thinking right now? What thoughts are in my consciousness right now? Or what thoughts arise, and what emotions arise with those thoughts? Or correspondingly, what emotions arising and what thought patterns do that trigger? And so you might not notice much space between observing the thought or the emotion, but with practice you'll have a lot of space, and you'll see the thoughts arise and fall, and some of them become elaborated into these grand stories or disasters, and others you just let them go. And with mindfulness, we're looking at not trying to control the thought, or not trying to like hop on it like a horse and ride it, but just allowing it to arise and fall, because now you're not merged with the thought, you're separate. You are the witness, you're the observer. So that thought can come and go, and you don't need to attach to it. You don't identify with it. By not identifying with it, you're creating a space between the observer and the thought. And that's a really nice practice, because the more space you can create, the more you can pause and not react, because you're not identified or merged with the thought itself or the emotion. And the witnesser, the observer, can take a look at that and say yes or no. We're not going to elaborate that. We'll just let that go. Furthermore, you're going to look for patterns. What patterns of thoughts are providing benefit, are leading you in the right direction, and what patterns of thoughts and emotions are not. And you're going to want to identify and maybe journal about those that are not, and those become the fodder for future work. Okay, so take a few more deep breaths and continue this for as long as you like, and I recommend you do this practice every day. Hooyah, divine out. Stay focused.